Ladies and gentlemen, if I could get your attention, please. And if I could ask my colleagues to come to the dais, it's time to start the October 6, 2017 South Coast Air Quality Management District Board meeting. We do not have a quorum yet, but we are easing in that direction.
What happens when you provide breakfast?
Yeah.
Take the food away. You have 3 dedicated members here.
Yes.
4 now.
You will get extra dessert at the luncheon.
Does that mean you're not going to steal my dessert this year?
Yeah, right.
There we go.
But,
Got a
great.
few for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We're going to ask Mr. Larry McCollum to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
10 and 11, yes. Mr. Eder?
Morning, Board. Morning, Board.
Morning.
My name is Harvey Eder, and I'm talking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. On this item, with heavy-duty diesel trucks, and this is the last year for 1B goods, that it should be limited only to zero, near zero, i.e. what the district's song has been for decades is natural gas, etc. And these vehicles, I was told by senior staff in their tests, are only showing 50% reduction of NOx and smog, not the 90% that they were trying to get. And in this light, and that solar has come way down, and as well as storage, and these vehicles should be solar battery electric or solar hydrogen, no renewable natural gas, and to fuel cells. It looks like the billions of dollars you propose spending, I'm trying to incorporate by reference any studies that have been done in-house or with contractors on reducing the 90% NOx and getting 50%. These numbers speak for themselves. I think you folks jumped in and you're not working these individual items on solar, and there's only been one meeting and mention of this solar initiative, and it's lacking. There's the state law that you had, the state legislature had to wait 3 days. There's a new law that, and they had to have this stuff published before there's decision-making. You are a quasi or legislative, administrative body, so it applies to you as well as other state laws. So this should be amended only to have zero emission technologies, i.e. solar renewables, and shouldn't be passed without it. And there are 5 or 6 manufacturers that we've been in talks with that say they can produce Class 8 heavy-duty trucks, solar batteries for solar electric, and we intend to pursue that. Okay.
Hold it right there, and Dr. Parker has a quick question for you.
Mr. Ettinger, did you say that staff told you that the diesel trucks from natural gas was only giving 50% reduction and not the 90%?
Yes,
What staff?
Dr. Fine. That was at the meeting,
Maybe he could clarify.
just a discussion at the end of the first day of sensor meeting.
I don't,
And also, I got a nod on this from
Hold a second, Harvey.
the Chief Operations Officer.
Dr. Fine, would you like to clarify that?
yeah, I don't know what he's referring to. The newer trucks have all, that are in testing are being certified at .02 or better, and the actuals are a little better. It is 90% cleaner
But
than
Maybe
the current
staff could
standard.
clarify. I've seen research that showed that they actually perform better than the .02, that more
Yeah.
like .01, 99% emission reductions.
Yeah.
Matt, that's what you've seen too, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So we have said that they're maybe performing 50% better than the standard. Maybe that was the confusion.
50% better than the standard. Does that answer your question, Dr. Parker?
Yes. Is that your understanding, Mr. Ettinger?
Mendacity. You have no
You mean
parents.
50% better than the certification level?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
We'll get to the standard eventually,
Okay,
right?
well, if I could get the information, and this could be held until this is cleared up.
Well, why don't you go ahead and give us our comments on item number 11?
Pardon?
Heather. Why don't
Number
you go ahead and
11?
give comments on item
I
11.
incorporate everything I said in number 10. And again, when you say school buses, great. You've got down here, replace or retrofit.
We can go ahead and
school
start
bus-
the timer for Mr. Adder for
Okay,
item 11.
yes. That, it says with new alternative fuel buses. That's code again.
The clock?
For,
Oh, there we go.
for, excuse me, natural gas.
Go ahead.
Should be limited to zero emission vehicles. Example, solar electric, solar hydrogen, fuel cell electric. This should not be passed without amendment, and we've got to wait on the studies, everything that's been looked at in terms of these numbers that don't seem to mesh right now. So whatever there is in the studies that have been done with contractors and in-house, I'm incorporating all those studies by reference into the record now, and we'll also follow up with public information requests, et cetera, but I'm not, that's kind of like fishing. Anyway, so also operations officer indicated that this may be the case. Any questions? Or?
Any further questions? I don't believe so. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
I'll look for a motion on item 10 and 11, or if anyone wants to have any other questions. A motion and a second. Anyone opposed? So moved. I believe the other item pulled was item 21. Who pulled 21? Nope.
So
Go
we're-
ahead, Joe. Yep.
I'm so sorry about that. Sorry about the delay. I just wanted to bring to the attention, which I have told staff, that on these hexavalent and chromium rules that we're going to be bringing up under our rule and control measure forecast, that on September 17th, it appears that the European Union has instituted a ban on certain chrome plating activities, I believe in decorative plating. But I just wanted other people to know, too, that staff is looking into this. They're going to talk to folks at the European Union, figure out exactly what they did and how they did it. And the hope is that there are some less toxic means of getting the job done. And we're going to do some research into that issue for these rules, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll move the item.
I have a motion and a second. Anyone opposed? So moved. All right, we'll move on to the board calendar. Items 24 through 31. Any questions? Comments? Welcome, Mayor Cacchiotti. Saw you right on your bike there. Welcome. All right, if not any questions, I'll have a motion and a second. Any opposed? So moved. On to item number 32.
So giving the presentation for this will be Heather Farr, Program Supervisor in our Planning and Rules Department.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, Chairman Burke and governing board members. It is my privilege to present the proposed amendments to Rule 1168. 1168 applies to sealants, adhesives, and their primers. This rule was adopted in 1989. It was last amended in 2005, though there hasn't been a significant reduction in VOC limits since the 2000 amendment. Staff estimates that the inventory for these products is significant. The AQMP estimates the inventory at around 4 tons per day. However, based on a survey conducted in 2013 of products that are sold into our jurisdiction, staff estimates that the emissions are closer to 10.5 tons per day. And this really is a growth industry. Use increases with population growth. There's also been increased interest for energy efficiency and weatherproofing. And this proposed amendment will satisfy the SIP commitment to get a 1 ton per day reduction of VOCs. The public process has been very long for this amendment. It spanned many years. We've had 11 working group meetings and numerous individual meetings with stakeholders, including manufacturers, distributors, end users, and the 11 trade associations that are impacted by this rule. Staff really worked to address their concerns, to clarify the rule language, and to propose VOC reductions. So if you look at the rule, we're proposing significant changes. The stakeholders requested that we harmonize our definitions with similar state and federal definitions. Staff tried to accommodate that as much as possible. We also tried to streamline and reorganize the rule to be more similar to other VOC regulations. We are proposing VOC limit reductions for 18 categories. This is mostly to capitalize on technology advancements that have occurred over the past 17 years. The proposal also includes reporting and labeling requirements for the manufacturers, but there's not new reporting requirements for most end users. Staff is clarifying but not expanding the applicability of Rule 1168. The current rule simply states that products regulated by the Consumer Product Regulation are exempt from 1168. But this has led to some confusion, so we're just going to clarify that Rule 1168 applies to those products sold in larger containers. It applies to consumer products if there's no VOC limit in the Consumer Product Regulation, and it applies to consumer products that are used in the manufacturing operation. This is not a change. Consumer products are already regulated by 1168. There are several products that are typically regulated at the district level, such as pipe cements and roof sealants. We are proposing a 1.4 ton per day VOC reduction. We primarily relied on that 2013 survey I described. We looked for categories that already had significant market share below the current limits. We used that as a guide for where to set our VOC limits. We also met with manufacturers and stakeholders, conducted online surveys, and did shelf surveys. A few of the proposed limits do not have significant market share below the limits. For those, we relied on manufacturer feedback for what would be feasible in the future. We allowed a long implementation date, up to 5 years, and are proposing technology assessments. This table shows new categories that were added, as well as the VOC reductions that we're proposing. I do want to point out that the board package, one of the categories was missing, foam insulation. That was inadvertently left off of the presentation, but it is in the rule. I want to emphasize that there's no new record-keeping requirement for the end users. We are, however, proposing reporting requirements for the manufacturers and distributors. As I mentioned, the inventory in the AQMD was significantly underestimated. The emissions from these categories are difficult to quantify. Most of the use is for consumers and contractor use, where there's no record-keeping or reporting requirements. So without this manufacturer reporting, it's hard for us to assess what the emissions are and track where the emissions go. And it's really critical for planning staff to have an accurate emissions inventory, especially for these high emitting categories. But the proposal does try to strike a middle ground so staff can get the information we really need without being overly burdensome. So we're proposing reporting every 3 years, and then it will go to 5 years, and it'll sunset in 2040. Just by contrast, architectural coating manufacturers have to report annually to us, and they have a similar emissions inventory. So for this proposal, we're only proposing 6 reports in 21 years. We did work through many of the key concerns with the industry. However, there are a few I would like to discuss today. One of these is PVC welding cements. This was brought up at Stationary Source Committee. There are 4 major manufacturers of these products. 2 of them have products existing in the field that already meet our future limit. One of them is pictured here. This is a multi-purpose cement. It can be used for ABS, PVC, and CPVC. It already meets the future limits and is available currently. This product was bought at a local Home Depot. Another concern I would like to address today is on test methods. When there's multiple test methods or if there is not an enforcement method, Rule 1168 applies to a diverse range of products. The current rule only really has 3 VOC test methods. Method 24, which is really our workhorse method, and then 2 very specific methods for specific products. But the industry has really evolved. Manufacturers have developed new technologies, and the test methods have to evolve too. So we are proposing to add quite a few test methods into this amendment. But staff felt that a guidance document would really be the best tool to specify which products should be analyzed by which test method. We are developing this guidance document right now. It will be a public process, and we will come to the board for approval. Until that document is finalized, we will rely on formulation data to verify compliance with the rule if there isn't a specific test method for those products. So one other area is if there is not an enforcement test method. And there's some niche categories where this happens. One of them is thin film energy curable products. For those, the resolution commits staff to rely on formulation data or manufacturer testing data if we come across them in the field. One other category that you might hear comments about today, we are proposing to include 2 new categories for expanding foam. Foam sealants is pictured off to the right. These are the small foam in a can products. They seal around windows and doors. These products can actually be pretty high VOC because hydrocarbons are typically used as the propellant, but there are non-VOC propellants that can be used for reformulation. So the other product is insulating foam, and that's pictured in the middle. This is a relatively new market, but it's seen a significant increase over the past 5 years. So these products fill the wall cavity, or the space between 2 joists. So staff interprets that to meet the current definition of a sealant in 1168. However, we had recent comments from this industry that they felt that these products are beyond the scope of 1168. So staff looked to other regulations for how they define sealant. The 2 main ones we relied on for this amendment was the CARB Consumer Product Regulation and the Ozone Transport Committee Model Rule. Those 2 regulations have the same definition for a sealant, and they include weatherproofing. So staff is proposing to add weatherproofing to our definition of sealant. This is just for further clarification, and it's not a significant change to the rule. We have made it clear since 2013 that we believe these products fall under our rule. So the last concern I would like to talk about is for another niche product. These are clear, paintable, immediately water-resistant sealants. The Consumer Product Regulation specifically excludes these products, and the stakeholders interpret that exclusion to mean that they were not regulated in California. Well, CARB and AQMD staff disagreed with this interpretation. These products currently are non-compliant with 1168, so the proposed rule will raise the VOC limit upon adoption and allow 5 years for these products to be reformulated down to the limit. The manufacturers would like us to have a technology assessment, but staff does not feel that's necessary because there currently are many low VOC sealants that are available in the marketplace. Some are clear, some are paintable, some are tinted. Okay, so staff would like to recommend that you certify the final environmental assessment, adopt the resolution, and amend Rule 1168. That concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions from the board before we take public comment? Go ahead, Joe. Dr. Lee?
There's three things I wanted to ask about. The first one is method 24 and for UV radiation curable services. There is a thing in the method that says that for reproducibility it doesn't apply to UV, and I've been told that EPA has a problem with us using it for that purpose. Is there an issue with the method when it comes to applying it to most UV applications?
Not that I'm aware of. It is included in method 24.
Yeah.
That method for UV curable was adopted in 1993.
Yeah,
I'm not
so
aware.
Section 9.1 under reproducibility says not applicable to UV radiation cured coatings. And so I'm just kind of wondering, because when I asked staff about that, you guys replied that for most of the UV uses that it's covered by method 24. So I want to make sure we have real clarity on that.
That is my understanding, that they are mostly covered. Other than the thin film, the UV curable products are covered by method 24.
Okay. The other thing that I've asked staff about, but I think it'd be useful for others to hear, is during this interim period between when we adopt the rule and you come back with the guidance, the test method guidance document, the intention of staff is not to use, to use product formulation data for enforcement purposes, but not lab test data for enforcement purposes for the things that have multiple test methods. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's correct, and we'll be working as quickly as possible to get the guidance in place.
That leads me to my third thing. In our board adoption resolution, we say you're going to come back with that, but there's no deadline. And when I asked staff about it, they said it probably takes 6 months, but they'd like a year at least to bring it back to the board. And staff's willing to agree to that? Nice catch.
Thank you.
Okay. So I intend to move that amendment to add a deadline of October 2018
Yeah.
when we get around to adopting. Thank you.
Dr. Park?
I have a question concerning sealants. There seems to be a disagreement, or was a disagreement between industry and as to what is a sealant, as it relates to formulating some of these products that will go around pipes that will be coming up, you know, in the walls or whatever it may be, that may have various different pollutant kind of formulations. Formaldehyde is one that I'm concerned with. Did we reach an agreement itself with industry as to what is really a sealant and the purposes for which it's used for?
I'll let Heather answer the details, but right now, I mean, if it's just a pipe sealer going through holes, that is pretty clearly a sealant. The real issue is the foam insulation, which is these large applications instead of using the traditional insulation, they have a foam spray insulation, and that we've always interpreted that to be subject to this rule under the definition of sealant, and we're clarifying that definition. But this is a relatively new product. They tend to be low VOC. We can come back in the future and look at a specific rule for that because it is a new product, but in the meantime, we're including in this rule just so there is some, and we're including a limit there that is most current products already meet. But in the future, we'll do a tech assessment, and if we need a separate rule, we can come back with a separate rule. But in the interim, we wouldn't have anything on this product that is in pretty high use and growing use at the moment.
The reason I asked that question because I thought this was something that is really used very extensively throughout the industry, especially in the construction industry. People are using these sealants for rat proofing and all kinds of other ways of covering around pipes, electrical pipes, plumbing pipes, drainage pipes, etc.
So one of the things this rule does is has that reporting, so we'll get a good handle on how much is being used and what the levels are, and then we'll be able to make adjustments in the future based on a tech assessment and the findings of the reporting requirement.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. We're hearing from industry that they're on the test methods. Apparently there are two different tests to choose from, and they want one specific test method. Can you, and you may have mentioned it earlier, can you, what's the response, what's district's response to that?
So the intent is always that any particular product only has one test method. The problem is that you may not know which specific product and define it very specifically. There is one test method, and that is the one that will be used for enforcement. And so it's hard to do that in rule language because we have to go through this process, and we need to really get specific as to the VOC content, whether it's energy curable, whether it's, and all these other factors in order to put it on a flow chart to the final method.
Any other questions before comment? All right, we'll go ahead and take a public comment this time. Lindsay Stovall. Here she comes. And after her, we'll have Doug Raymond.
Good morning. I apologize. I'm a little under the weather today. My name is Lindsay Stovall, and I'm with the American Chemistry Council Center for the Polyurethanes Industry, otherwise known as CPI. We appreciate the opportunity to provide comments to the South Coast Air Quality Management District in response to the proposed amended Rule 1168. Adhesive and sealant applications. CPI thanks South Coast staff for their willingness to meet with us and to consider potential changes to Rule 1168. CPI appreciates that South Coast has raised the upon adoption VOC limit for foam sealants to 250 grams per liter and the inclusion of the technology assessments to be conducted in 2020 to determine the feasibility of the January 1st, 2023 implementation of the 50 grams per liter VOC content limit in the covered products. Further, CPI supports the board resolution stating that the technology assessment will consider product volume, application method, and use of various foam sealants when determining the feasibility of complying with the 50 grams per liter VOC limit. We remain concerned with the South Coast's intended approach with regard to the regulation of insulating foam. The primary purpose of two-component SPF insulation is to insulate a building, not to seal gaps or joints. Therefore, spray polyurethane foam insulation does not meet the applicable definition of a sealant and should not be considered a regulated product under Rule 1168. CPI raised these concerns in a letter to the Stationary Sources Committee, and in response, South Coast staff changed the definition of sealant in the proposed amendments that were presented to the committee to state that products designed for weatherproofing would now be considered sealants. This change to the definition of sealant significantly changes the scope of the regulations and will impose new legal requirements, both VOC content limits and reporting requirements, on manufacturers without adequate public notice and opportunity to provide input during the regulatory process. Although South Coast staff has stated that this change has been intended since 2013, because SPF insulation is not primarily used to seal gaps or joints, that intent was not clear. This ambiguity is reflected in the fact that CPI and its members have never understood SPF insulation to be regulated under Rule 1168, and that the proposed amendments to Rule 1168 have created an entire new category to regulate SPF insulation. Therefore, prior to the governing board approving the proposed amendments to Rule 1168, the proposal should be amended to remove insulating foam as a product category. CPI welcomes the opportunity to further discuss the points raised excuse me, above with South Coast prior to the publication of the final Rule 1168. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment this morning.
Thank you, and get some good tea and get some rest. Thanks for your comments. Doug Raymond, and after him, Howard Berman.
Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the board. I'm here representing the National Aerosol Association, and I have the unique opportunity today to support your rule. Normally, I'm here opposing your rules. We worked very closely with the staff in 2013, 2014, and again this last year. I'd like to thank Heather. She reached out several times, and we were able to modify the rule, or actually keep the rule the same, so that it kept all of our products consistent with what they were. And we'd like to thank the staff again for all their work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fabio Castilian.
Chairman Burke, members of the board, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I'm here representing Tremco, a large manufacturer of adhesives and sealants, and they too are supporting the rule. And we'd also like to thank staff. From the get-go 4 or 5 years ago, we've engaged with them. They've come out to work sites and really gone the extra step to understand not only how our products are made, but how they're used. So we appreciate that and are glad to be able to stand here and support the rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Have Fabio come down, and then Curtis Coleman after him.
Good morning. My name is Fabio Castellani. I'm the president of Well Done Adhesive. We are the developer of solvent cement technology for PVC, CPVC, and ABS. First of all, I want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to speak. I also want to go on record in support of the proposed VOC limits for PVC and CPVC solvent cement. Well Done believes that there are very worthwhile efforts towards sensible and achievable air quality improvements. I have listened to the previous discussion on this, and it would seem that the question in some of the board's members' mind is, in fact, what is sensible and achievable as far as the industry is concerned. I have also heard reported statement from a known expert in the field of solvent cement, and I'm, contrary to this, and I'm here to tell you that those experts probably are either basing their remarks on 15-year-old technology or represent companies that have chosen not to invest in research and development. The fact of the matter, as Heather already stated today, as we're here, there are already products on the market that in fact meet or exceed the proposed rule of VOC. Well Done in particular has a couple of different brands with products that also already meet the new proposed rule for PVC of 425 grams per liter. One product has been around for a couple of years, as a matter of fact, and it's sold mostly international, very little domestic. But we just launched in May another product, and I know one of the questions in the last meeting was, what is the product? Mm-hmm. The product is the 905 Echo. It's available throughout the distributors like SiteOne, Ewing, Imperial, Horizon, just to name a few. So these are some of the largest distributors in the country. Now, the concern was, okay, the product, you can meet the standard, but are you providing the same kind of quality, same kind of performance, right? I can assure you that Well Done has done an incredible amount of hydrostatic testing for these products that meet and far exceed actually the performance requirement of, ASTM D2564. The same technology can be applied for CPVC. We don't have a product yet, but we don't expect that to be particularly difficult. In closing, I just wanted to pose a different question from the question, whether or not this measure should be approved. The question that I'm asking myself, why are we waiting 6 years to implement something that already is on the market? Thank you.
Thank you. Kurt? And then after Kurt, we'll have Rita Loof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Kurt Coleman here today on behalf of the Southern California Air Quality Alliance. We too would like to thank Heather and the entire staff who worked on this for the excellent work they've done, the receptiveness to virtually all of the comments that have been submitted. And we are here to support the rule, but we continue to have one concern which involves the sell-through provision, and our concern is actually the use-through issue. Right now, you can't, the sell-through provision is 3 years, and the use-through essentially is 3 years as well. So it is possible for someone to go purchase a product at the end of the sell-through time period, and the next day or next week or next month, it would be illegal to use it. I know staff has advised us, or has advised that we brought this up in written comments and at the Stationary Source Committee, and the staff's response was, well, the shelf life on these products is limited in most cases to around a year, so it shouldn't be an issue. But shouldn't be an issue somehow down the road, the issue crops up. And so I'm not here to, that's one. We would just like to see a little extra time added on to allow people to use it after they purchase it. Other than that, we think the staff has done an excellent job on this rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita?
Good morning. Rita Lou, Radtech International. We appreciate staff's outreach efforts and the professionalism shown by Mike Krause, Heather Farr, and Nicole Silva. We have two main concerns in this rule. Number one, we still don't know which test method will be used for enforcement of UV, EV, LED materials. And number two, the overly prescriptive administrative requirements, which will not just impact the end users, but also anyone who is involved with the product. On the issue of test methods, we're requesting that our methods be specified in the rule. Decades ago, EPA determined that the traditional method 24 was not applicable to UV, EV materials. Section 9.1 of method 24 states, quote, not applicable to UV radiation-cured coatings, end quote. At the district's request, Radtech formed a coalition of over 25 member companies to develop a method. After 20 years, we got approval from ASTM, the country's premier authority in test method development. The resolution language only commits staff to, quote, review, end quote, ASTM D7767. The method will be allowed for labeling and reporting, but not for compliance purposes. In 2014, Rule 1130 included similar resolution language, which I provided to you, which read, quote, whereas the SCAQMD Governing Board has directed staff to work with stakeholders to continue the development and use of appropriate alternative methods to determine an equivalent VOC content, end quote. 3 years later, staff has not developed a method that would be more appropriate than D7767. This uncertainty puts the industry in an enforcement predicament, as we do not know which method will be used by the district to verify compliance. Some of our companies have thousands of products. One company reported that if they had to retest every product, it would cost them over $9 million. We don't think adopting a rule and later developing guidelines on how to prove compliance is good public policy. The right thing to do would be to allow the method we have until such time as staff come up with a better alternative. On the issue of record keeping, During the Rule 219 development, staff said that they needed to know where these operations were. But how many ways do we have to report? And do we have to continue to file reports until 2040, which is what this rule does? If you compare this rule to the requirements for chrome plating operations, the requirements, record-keeping requirements of this rule are more stringent than those currently required for chrome plating processes. We urge your support of our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Board member questions? Councilmember Mitchell?
Thank you. I'd just like to ask staff about some of those comments. The test method, I think this was asked before, is there a way to give more certainty to the test method until we find a better way? Or I know you said you need alternate methods, so until you determine which is the right one. So perhaps you could answer that.
Well, as was mentioned earlier, with the language as it exists, we are going to develop guidance, and until that time, the only way we'll be able to do enforcement on these products is through the formulation. And so there will be no chance that until the guidance and that public process completes and comes back before the board, there will be no secret test method developed and used for enforcement. The only way we'll be able to do it is through the formulation, which is the only current way we know how to do it. So there's no other choice.
And do you have any estimate of the timeline it will take to complete this process?
Well, it's going to depend on the public process and how contentious that is, but we don't want to have this gap be too long, because essentially what we are limiting ourselves to is using formulation until we come back to the board. One concept is to come back relatively quickly with some of the more non-controversial test methods and finalize those, and then for the more controversial ones, we may have a little bit longer public process. Staff is ready to do it as quickly as possible, but we want to have that public process and come back before the board.
The other issue is duplicative record keeping. I know we do have some reporting requirements under other rules, but I also understand the reason that you are pursuing this is because our inventories, we think, are underreported. So could you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, so as Heather stated, there are no new record-keeping requirements in this rule for end users. What we have done is use the experience of our Rule 314 that for architectural coatings to have the manufacturers let us know how much they are selling in the basin. And that is how we will be able to get a handle on the inventory and the types of products out there and the VOC content of those products, and that'll help us going forward in terms of what areas need further study and may need rule amendments. And 314 is annual reporting. There's fees associated by volume and by VOC content. In this case, we're not charging any fees. We're doing it every 3 years. We created some other flexibilities in terms of reporting, so we tried to make it as easy as possible on the manufacturers. But again, the end users, there are no additional record-keeping requirements in this rule beyond what already exists. The 219 form that Rita mentioned is not a new form that they have to fill out. It's an easier form that they have to fill out in replacing another procedure. So.
And do you foresee a time down the road when we have achieved more certainty in the inventory where you might not require the original manufacturer, distributors, and sellers to do this reporting?
Well, what we've done is sunset that. So every 3 years for some time, I think through, through 2025. So we'll have a few reports if we're getting what we need, or maybe we weren't it turns out we weren't overestimating it. We could always come back if those reporting requirements were too burdensome. But there's some work involved in collecting that data from the manufacturers, but if you look at the architectural coating manufacturers, once they get rolling with their systems, the annual reporting isn't as burdensome. They just need to figure out they already have the data, they just need to learn how to package it for our purposes. Yeah.
So one other issue that was raised was that the sell-through period and the user period is the same. Do you foresee problems with that? Would it be reasonable to include additional time in the use period, another 6 months or a year, or what would be your opinion on that?
I'll let Heather follow, but it's very similar to what we have in other rules, right? We have this 3-year sell-through use period, and again, there is the shelf life issue. We just haven't seen those problems on the use end. I've let Heather weigh in if we've seen.
This hasn't been an issue in the past. Typically, products are sold through in the first year. We just allow this extra few years so the manufacturers don't have to come back and try to collect those products. So most products are sold through in that first year. So we've really never had a problem with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Liu?
I think the bigger picture thing here is that it looks like we have some companies who are leading in trying to reduce these emissions. Some of them have to do with new technologies, like the energy curable technologies, but some of them, like the guy who came up and said, why are we waiting? I kind of want to know that. I mean, it seems like his company has gone out and invested in and developed a product that meets or exceeds the standard that we're going to set, yet we're allowing his competition 5 years to catch up. And I think we want to encourage companies like that to make those investments, and I think he asked a good question. So I would wonder what staff had to say about that.
Obviously, rulemaking is a balance between all the stakeholders, and that's where we came out in terms of the time needed for some other manufacturers to reformulate with the tech assessment to make sure it is possible. There's still a little bit of work to be done on for all the manufacturers in terms of standards and certification for use in certain applications. So we need to see how that plays out. But again, we try to balance and come to the board with a balanced approach. It's not going to make everyone happy on all sides.
How about this? Why don't we, like you provided that picture of the Oatly all-purpose PVC cement, and Mayor Benoit and I are going out and buying some as soon as possible, because every once in a while, something breaks and I got to use that stuff. So why don't we put on our website pictures of the ones that exceed the standard now and direct people to it, so when I need to go out and buy these products, I'm buying the ones that pollute the least?
So a good example of how we do that is our 314, our architectural coding reporting. That data is publicly available, and we put it on a website so people who want to know what's compliant or super compliant.
Okay, I've never seen it. I've spent a lot of time on our website. I've never seen it.
We're trying to make it more user-friendly.
I haven't.
That's another outcome of the reporting is we'll know what's out there and what's available and can promote the compliant or super compliant products.
I even took the staff presentation in the board package and blew it up on my iPad to see how much it cost, and it was a reasonable amount of money. I mean, I'm willing to pay that for something that has 317 grams per liter instead of over 500. I think we need to help consumers support the companies that are making those investments.
So, Dr. Liu, part of what we're doing is, as you know, redesigning the website. And you make an excellent suggestion. We have
your mic's off.
Something that does just that.
Thank you.
Mayor Cacciodi?
Ben, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne, what I'm thinking, following up with Joe, and I was thinking about this earlier, during the day I work with the Contractor State License Board, and there's 44 classifications of licenses in the state, 300,000 contractors. And those 300,000 contractors, I think most of these products are used by contractors, home improvement, and with those contractors, probably 5, 10 workers. They do several different jobs. You're talking 1 million workers. You're talking millions of homes and families and government offices, private offices. I think, following up with Joe's comment, I think we should work with the Contractor State License Board, because those 300,000 contractors that work in our homes, in our buildings, have no idea what we're talking about. They get these from the manufacturers, and it would be nice if they could see when they're going out to purchase. I know when I had my contractor working, and he put in a contract, paint, I said, no, low VOC. When I went home, he'd bought the wrong paint. He said, nope, we're not going to use that. I said, low or no VOC. Go back to Benjamin Moore, whoever it is, and get the right paint. So we've got to I think with working with these government agencies, and I work with the Contractors Board every day, and they're willing to work. If we can get that information out to these contractors, wow, what a difference it would make. And I think that's greatest on our website, but I haven't seen it either. So
Yeah, we can definitely commit to contacting the board and seeing how we can better exchange information.
Great, thanks. Chairman Burke?
I agree with both their comments. I think that the development of our new website, since it is a work in progress, and we do have new personnel overseeing that, I think that, and I know you can't do it with the manpower you got now, so I'm not asking for more work with the same people. But Joe's idea about us providing, if I don't, Kurt's gonna tell me, you know, if it's legal for us to have, like, advertised products on our website, that there may be a question to that.
Stick to the facts.
But if you bifurcate that issue off and go to Mayor Cacciotti's idea about working with the contracting groups, I think that, you know, we got, it's an idea which time is long overdue. And I think that we ought to look at maybe augmenting, maybe in our next budget, Mr. Alatorre's outreach program, so that he, excuse me for my voice, so he can have the personnel to do that. You know, I just, it's an idea which is long overdue.
Thanks, Dr. Burke. I think one of the things that we're learning is that there are a myriad number of opportunities for us to expand our outreach. And so we found working with the city managers is a good way to share where we are on the rulemaking process. We're finding these other organizations that have really good networks and that directly use products that directly affect our air quality. So we're always looking for those opportunities to expand outreach, whether it's through private organizations, whether it's through local government, whether it's through state organizations. We will certainly seek those out. And we're very fortunate with our new IT, Ron. He's got a lot of experience and he's been very active, and I'm not sure we're going to need a lot of people, but we'll be able to get a lot done.
You know, I don't know if it's your philosophic managerial style that has brought this forth, but I think it's been a real positive move forward in the kind of outreach that we're doing in the public education that we're doing, because when I was in the sports marketing business, we used to say, if it's not on television, it didn't really happen. So we need these education processes to be moved forth, and I think that you ought to put some thought on additional educational processes that might be appropriate for us to look at.
Dr. Parker?
You know, I've been listening to the various different dialogue that has been going backwards and forth. I'm very concerned that we're talking about taking a particular product and talking about the different manufacturers that have various different emissions from those manufacturers. One, is that really appropriate for us to do? Or is it really appropriate for us to set standards by which people should be able to manufacture products? If it's a variable, it's a variable. If it's a certain number of grams per liter or whatever it may be, then we should specify that. I don't want to see us get into a situation of having to defend ourselves on promoting someone's other product as it may be good or bad. From the experience, architectural products themselves can be used for various different reasons. And one may be good for that particular reason. For instance, if you're talking about coating a cement wall that is below surface for drainage purposes, for penetration of walls. Some products that are said that they can coat, but they are not really good at preventing that from coming through. They may have higher higher VOCs or VO, various different other coating mechanisms. And I think that's a concern that we must be, as we begin to say that we're going to do these things, are we proliferating ourselves to an extent and saying you're promoting this product over ours? And that's really not what I believe our goal is and our objectives are. That is to set some standards that people can basically go by and let then the marketplace decide which product are the people who are the professionals, the architects, the engineers, et cetera, or the contractors, decide which one is best for that particular job or that particular product. So I would caution the board, we shouldn't really step off into a quagmire that we're going to get ourselves into saying that we're promoting somebody else's product over their particular one.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I know we're very cautious and very aware of performance issues. I think a good example is what we do with AQ-Spec, where we look at a number of different sensors. And we don't talk about one product being better than another. We just say these products have met the performance indications and they correlate well with federal reference methods. And legal has a very close view in terms of the concerns that you've just expressed. So definitely we can set the standards and we can take into consideration. And if we can't do it in a way that doesn't provide that sort of unbiased, these are just the products that meet these specifications, then I don't think we would move in that direction. I think we'd be able to address that concern.
And I agree with Dr. Parker, but I really want to say what we're trying to do is just education and awareness.
Right.
Really bothered me several years ago when I was reading the continuing education for registered nurses in California. I was reading their course outline. And one of the comments they had in there just shows you how little awareness there was about pollution. They were talking about how to educate nurses, continuing education. There was something about a comment I read in one of the courses that said, well, sources of pollution may be a cause of, there's debate on whether sources of pollution there's talking may cause asthma. I mean, wait a second, these are our medical health providers, registered nurses getting trained by somebody that's saying there may be possible, when we know it's a definite connection. So it really irked me that so many people out there in these different industries have no clue or idea. And basically, I didn't either for many years. I worked in the lawn maintenance industry, siphoning gas out of a car to put in a lawnmower. I didn't know that as a little kid. Thank God I'm still here. But I wish there had been education and awareness back then. And we got to get that out, even in the medical industries, the old days where the doctor was telling us, he's smoking a cigarette when a person comes with lung problem. And it's true today in all the different industries. So I agree with Dr. Parker, but I also agree with Joe and Chairman Burke that we've got to get out there.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I appreciate the discussion there, and I think this is just trying to strike the balance between the two. So, I can see both sides and appreciate all of your comments. My first question is regarding the sell-through, use-through, and I can appreciate how things have happened in the past. I think that looking forward, though, just saying that that's how we've done it in previous rules isn't a good enough explanation for me. I can appreciate how things happen in reality versus what we put in the rule. So sell-through in the first year and then use-through in the final two. But the way the rule is written, sell-through in the first three and use-through in the first three, the public comment that was made that whether it's theoretically or realistically you could purchase on the last day and then not be able to use on the following day is a paradox for me. And so I would, the industry might not like it, but my one suggestion might be that we change that to have a shorter sell-through and the longer use-through, or we provide some extension toward the end on the use-through and add that 6 months or 12 months like Councilmember Mitchell was mentioning. So, I think moving forward, that's what we should do, and I'm pretty firm on that. I'm a little concerned about the comment that was made with respect to the insulation versus the sealant part, and how the public commenter felt like they might not have been part of the public process because their product, they didn't intend to be part of this rule. So I was wondering what outreach we did to that particular industry during the public process part so that they could be a part of it. If they weren't contacted in some way, then it would be challenging for me to support the inclusion of that part in this particular rule because they just wouldn't be part of that public process. If we did reach out to them, that would be a different story. They might interpret it differently, but if we reached out, then that meant that at least we gave them the opportunity. So if you could explain just kind of our outreach process, I'd appreciate that on that item.
So Heather will explain the outreach, and then I can address the sell-through and the use-through provision.
We did outreach to this industry back in 2013 when we began the process.
Could you go to a microphone? Thank you.
You just turned it off. We did outreach to, sorry, I'm usually
It's
plenty
working,
loud
it
enough.
just needs to get a little closer, guys.
We did reach out to this industry back in 2013 when this process began, but they really did choose not to participate, so they didn't come really to meet with us until around August 30th to bring us their concerns. But there was outreach to this industry.
Okay, and we outreach via email or?
We have a
you know,
newsletter that we send out. A lot of these products are already very low VOC, so I think they were initially just not very concerned with what we were doing because we're not proposing any really significant VOC reductions on the installation.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll let you respond to the other part.
Sure, with regards to the sell-through and the use-through provisions, the 3-year sell-through provision is consistent with EPA provisions, and I would suggest that we maintain that. The use-through, we can go to an additional year on the use-through provision, so we can make those changes on that. And that would then definitely address the concerns that we heard expressed today.
Great, well, thank you very much, I appreciate that. Lastly, just getting back to this record-keeping issue that has been discussed here, and I want to try to understand the overall motivation, what we're hoping to accomplish here. I understand that right now, from a record-keeping standpoint, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're identifying 4 tons of VOC emissions, but based on some estimations of what might be out there, it was 10.5 tons. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, the initial AQMP estimates were based on a very crude method, and then there has since then been some survey data that came in, and using that, a little bit less crude methods, it could be as high as 10.
Okay.
So what we're proposing is doing this reporting just like we did for architectural coatings, which will really nail down those numbers.
Okay, and then with the, if I heard correctly and understood correctly, we're hoping for a 1.4 ton reduction based on this rule, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that based on the 4 tons, or is that based on that crude 10 tons?
That's based on the AQMP inventory of about 4 tons.
Okay.
So this could actually, once we get the new data, we can reassess how many emission reductions we're actually getting from these amendments.
Okay,
But
so
we have a SIP commitment for at least 1 ton based on those old inventories.
great, okay. All right, and so just understanding this, so from a record-keeping standpoint, we're hoping to better identify how many tons of emissions that we actually have out there versus what's happening in reality. Then we're hoping to see roughly 1.4 ton reduction based on this rule, or 1 ton in the AQMP. What value do we expect to receive from the record keeping with the 50 grams per liter portion of this rule versus those that are much more significant? And they seem to be the ones that are most concerned. So do we see that as being the big problem of this potential 6 ton gap here between what's being reported in reality, or the crude estimation, I guess would be the best way of putting it? Do we see that as being the 50 grams per liter or less that are the ones that are causing that 6 ton gap, or is it the more excessive VOC emission group that are causing that problem?
Right, so first I want to clarify, it's not record keeping, it's reporting. So the end user has no additional requirements. The answer is we don't know. I mean, there could be high volume products at 50 grams per liter that end up making a significant impact. But the other reason we want to know about those products is because if just like in architectural coatings, we saw a lot of products come in, paints come in below 25 grams per liter. And when we know that, that allows us to fix our inventories, know that there's products available, allow us to reassess our rules. So if we only get the higher VOC products reported, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle that helps us understand the industry and what's going on.
And that was just kind of the purpose of my question, just trying to understand basically what's our crude estimation right now of, is the problem more on the under 50 grams or more on the over 50 grams?
So there are a wide array of products that are reported to us. Some are as low as almost zero, and some are as high as 800 gram per liter. I couldn't give you an estimate of what the percentages are low and what the percentages are high.
Okay. And they just seem to be the ones that are having the biggest problem. So I'm trying to, like I said, trying to understand what our motivation is, and then what do we really get out of it. So
There are
is it
lots
just,
of categories that are formulated like below 50 gram per liter, and we have limits that are below 50 gram per liter. So then we have no inventory on those entire categories, like large categories that are below 50 gram per liter, that we would be missing that picture if we didn't have them report to us.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Liu mentioned he might have an amendment, but I would like to include the amendment regarding the use through as well when we get to that point. So,
Yeah, so I'd be
thank
happy
you.
to move the item with two revisions, one being the use through period now being 4 years instead of 3 per the agreement that staff just made, but the second being in the adopting resolution, there's a paragraph on the test method coming back to the governing board. I'd like to include a deadline of October 2018.
So I have a motion to a second.
Second.
Before we take that vote, I just want to note that I did receive a late comment card from Mr. Mark Brown. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, we'd already gone into deliberation and closed the public comment period. So at this point, we're not going to take any more public comment. All right. I have a motion and a second. Any opposed? So ordered. All right. As amended, yep. With that, we'll go into public comment. I have Harvey Etter.
Mr. Vice, just before we go, I understand we took a vote because I do believe in the process, but it's no secret that I'm not a big fan of these away meetings, and I won't go into that, but, you know, we don't get that much public testimony. We just had a rule that affects a really wide variety of manufacturers and people. I have no idea who this person is. If someone comes and submits a speaker card, we're at a remote location in downtown LA. Now, some of you may have noticed that didn't stay here last night. This is a very awkward place to get to, particularly if you're not familiar with this place. If you don't come to downtown LA a lot, this would be quite an obstacle course. So somebody missed public comment and we cut them off. And, you know, who knows if it would have changed anything, but I know we've had a big discussion in the last few months about public comment, but under these circumstances, I just got to tell you, that's really awkward. I mean, you know, and I am a stickler for the rules, but you've never seen me run these meetings, but if you've seen others, the one thing you'd notice is they are fast and extremely efficient and unforgiving, really. So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, you know, I'm here this morning. It took us longer than we thought, and I've been here more than a few times in my life, but, you know, someone made the effort to come all this way to say something.
Would you like to make that motion to reopen public testimony?
Well, I just think the board should be aware that those optics are awkward. I mean, if they're, well, we have voted on the item at this point. We could withdraw the vote.
We could always revisit that.
All right, well, then I'll make I would make the motion that we reconsider the vote and to consider hearing from whoever the public speaker was, assuming they didn't leave in frustration when we denied him.
Second.
Is the gentleman still here? Mark Brown?
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, he's still here. I will second.
We got a second from Mayor Casciotti.
Yeah,
we need two-thirds.
Yeah, you obviously need a vote.
Or three-quarters, two-thirds, whatever it is. Any opposed to reopening and hearing the testimony from Mr. Mark Brown? All right, with that, Mr. Brown?
Can't wait for it.
Your cousin was very persuasive.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Supervisor
Right,
Nelson.
right, my college roommate. What's your name again?
No, I'm not from Fullerton, but I'm actually from Downey, but I just flew in from Europe, so I apologize getting here late and submitting my card late. Again, my name is Mark Brown. I'm president and technical director of MPS Adhesives. We make solvent cements, and the Rule 1168 directly affects us. But I'm also, my background, I know that president of IPS Corporation, spoke a little bit earlier, made some comments. I used to work for IPS, and I actually worked for IPS when the rule was initially developed. So I did all the technical work back then with regard to taking a look at our solvents, our formulations, and had to reformulate the product, and actually was part of the process of developing the test method that's used in 1168, now the 316A. I guess my first question really is, back in the early 2000s, the AQMD contacted the industry-wide and told us that the rule limits were being made permanent. And I just remember my grade school days, and permanent means forever, as far as I know. So I'm really kind of surprised that it's been revisited since officially they were made permanent. So my second comment really is regarding some of the products that have been, I guess, displayed on the monitor or spoken about by Mr. Castellani. And I have some, I really don't know very much about their products. I don't work for them anymore, so I don't know what voodoo they've done. But one thing I can say is that I do know that the product that IPS is purporting to be an ultra-low VOC product does not strictly meet the industry standard, which is ASTM D2564. Apparently it meets the performance standards. So I don't know exactly what is being done there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the inspectors around the country are going to allow the product because it doesn't strictly meet the standard itself. So I'm concerned about what reformulation has been done and what effect that has on the permanence of the product. The product is so simple to use, and I don't know if any of you have ever used PVC pipe cements or CPVC pipe cements and installed sprinkler systems in your own yard or things of that nature, but you can essentially use the product and within about 20-25 minutes test it, put it full under pressure, and it's going to last for the length of the life of the pipe itself. It's really a remarkable product and very simple. But we are really restricted, and the one thing I will say that I believe that one comment was made that we're talking about 15-year-old technology. Well, 15-year-old technology was a technology that I know and developed, and I know it's very sound, and we did, and IPS did at that time a great deal of research, not just IPS, but the entire industry about what components can make up the product. And I feel very strongly that to make a product that is stable, commercially viable, and safe, because a lot of these applications, most of these applications are under high pressure.
Sir,
it's very important.
run past your time. Thank you for your comments.
All right, so thank you.
Sean? You've already had your 3 minutes, unfortunately. Any board members have any questions for any of the public commenters before I close public comment again?
Just of staff, I think I understood what, Mr. Vice Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I assume he's referring to those slides we saw of the product. Does anyone know what this gentleman's referring to as far as meeting, and it's some kind of an inspection standard? I mean, most of us don't get an inspection in our front yard, but I assume that there's some industry inspection that goes on if you're maybe putting things in a commercial building. Are we familiar with that? Is there any veracity to what he's saying?
Yes, there are ASTM performance standards that go along with PVC, CPVC, and ABS. The products currently meet all the performance standards, but there is a requirement in those methods that they dissolve a certain percentage of the plastic. This is not a requirement in European standards. That's really the reason we allowed 5 years, is because they have committed to go to the ASTM and make that change to the method.
That was fast, and the acoustics
Sorry.
aren't great, and that's not your fault. But did I quickly hear there are performance standards, but there is some standard that this stuff doesn't meet?
There's one piece of the method, the ASTM method, that the products do not currently meet to be in the plumbing code. That's why we allowed 5 years in a technology assessment. We're really going to check in to see if the changes have been successful through the ASTM committee.
Okay. And if it doesn't, we reserve the right to extend the time?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Dr. Parker.
Just as a person who had experience and also as a licensed engineering contractor, there are several ABS and, if you want to call them PVC types of pipes that have solvents that have to meet certain standards. Put pressure, put them under air pressure for gas, for sewage, for water, for water mains, fire hydrants, and those kinds of things. And they are out there, and they do have to meet these standards for holding a certain amount of pressure that usually is about 150% of what is really required by the regulatory agency. And you put them under there, and they have to basically stay there for maybe 72 hours or whatever it may be. So, yes, they are, and some are a lot better than others, without talking about names, that basically do not fail those tests. And, it used to be such that these tests used to be made out of steel pipe, but now that they've gone down to a lot of the PVC and plastic pipes, they have solvents to meet those requirements.
Any other questions or comments? I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period.
I will move the item as I moved it before, without amendment. I mean, with the past amendments, but not any more amendments.
Second.
All right. Any opposition to that? So ordered. All right. Again, we'll go back into a public comment period. Harvey, come on down. Sorry for the repeat there, Harvey.
Yeah, he was there, and then he had to go back.
Hello, no problem. I'm kind of scattered. There's a Yiddish term called verstumbled. I'm like confused and stuff. Anyway, one thing is I'm supposed to have comments on legal's demur and litigation against you folks in CARB. And it's due today. I want to incorporate everything I've said today and everything on the record that went into the 16 plan into my comments on the demur. And so there's a meeting on the 19th of the independent systems operator for stakeholders. I don't know if anybody's coming from the board, from the district, but it's on the 18th and 19th in Sacramento. A couple weeks ago, I was in Las Vegas for the Solar Energy Industries Association, and as far as I know, I tried calling Dr. Phil, couldn't get a hold of him, tried several times, tell him about this, etc. And I don't think anybody came, but it's something, it shows, a lack of putting their nose to the grindstone and really dealing with the implication of solar technologies, solar renewables coming down so fast, and what it means to society. There's potential to get low and middle income people into the equity here instead of just wealthy people and corporations. And there should be renewable, for solar renewables, for the investment tax credits and the depreciation, there should be refundable credits. And this is being negotiated right now, and the district has to get on this right away for low and middle income. And this is in federal, they want California on board on this thing with deductions with local taxes. There is, some weight here that California has in these negotiations. I think it's important. When governments put in systems, if wealthier people and banks don't do it, it should be a hybrid, including low and middle income. And I worked as a consultant to the PUC on some of that 35 years ago. Anyway, this stuff about Exxon knew, there was August 23rd Harvard study in LA Times that in the 70s, Exxon knew about climate change and increase in carbon dioxide. This is known for over 100 years, actually. And then they did it for a while, and then they financed deniers. and that's part of the problem. And I've got a lot other things I'd like to say to you and talk to you about. De Leon should go for 100% by 2025. A compromise would be 2030. This happened in Hawaii. They went for 2030, and they had to go to 2045. They passed it. We didn't pass it.
Yep. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Etter, and there'll be other opportunities. Thank you.
Is there any
Your time's up.
response or questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, any board member travel and conflict of interest? And if not, we'll go into closed session.
It is necessary for the board to recess to closed session regarding, to recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.9A and 54956.9D1 to confer with its counsel regarding pending litigation which has been initiated formally and to which the SCAQMD is a party. The actions are Communities for a Better Environment versus South Coast Air Quality Management District, Los Angeles Superior Court, case number BS 169841, Safe Fuel and Energy Resources, California et al. Versus South Coast Air Quality Management District, Los Angeles Superior Court, case number BS 169923, parens Tesoro, close parens. People of State of California, XREL, Exide Technologies, Los Angeles Superior Court, case number BC 533528. In re Exide Technologies, Inc., U.S. Bankruptcy Court, District of Delaware, case number 13-11482, parens KJC, closed paren, bankruptcy case.
We need to ask, they're not going to grab a copy.
Hello, in order to go into closed session, we need to clear the room. So if everybody could exit to the lobby. So again, we're going to ask if you're not a board member to please clear the room so we can go into closed session.
A report of the reportable actions taken in closed session will be filed with the clerk of the board and made available to the public upon request. The meeting is adjourned.